All right, it's 10. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining live this morning. I'm very, very happy that you're here and that it really helps me also to actually speak to real people. So thank you also for joining live. Welcome to the Explorative Taster Sessions, day one of Back to Basics for Ambitious Introverts. So these sessions are going to be short and sweet. I'm hoping to make them simple and informative so that you can take some key messages and not feel overwhelmed, okay? So any feedback on that is also very, very welcome. This is the first time that I'm doing this format, so I really also want to learn what could help you. So before we get started, there's two things that I want to mention. So this session is going to be about 15 minutes. And I'm going to give a simple exercise at the end. And it shouldn't take you more than 15 minutes to do that either. So the first thing I want to mention is about the exercises. And this is for people who are maybe just starting a new business, or maybe you've been in for a few years and you want to practice a little bit with putting yourself out there, but in an introvert-friendly way. So if you do the exercises and you send them to me, I will pick I'll pick someone to interview in my private Facebook group. And it's just a way to kind of practice giving interviews in an introvert-friendly space. So there's a dedicated thread in the Facebook group for your answers. And I also have a Google form set up that you can use, and you'll get information about that via email if you're interested in joining that. And the second thing I want to mention is that next Monday, I'm going to give a masterclass about 5 elements that you can leverage to create ease and fulfillment in your work. And the sign-up page for that has been updated, and you can find the link in your chat box. The person who I'm going to interview, it will also be announced on that masterclass. All right, let's get into it. So today we're talking about why it's important for introverts to have mental space. But let's start at the beginning. Because leading up to this taster, people were contacting me saying that I don't really know if I'm introverted, but I do recognize the things that you talk about. So let's just start there. Let's call it the pink elephant and talk about what does it really mean to be introverted. So we have that context. So I think that the easiest way to kind of tell for yourself if you're more introverted or more extroverted is to finish this sentence. After I interact with others, I ... So I'll give you a second to kind of have a mental image of what the end of that sentence would look like for you. Okay, so hold on to that for a minute. So most introverts will finish it something along the lines of, like, after I interact with others, I need time to recharge. Or I really like to be alone. Something like that. Whereas most extroverts will probably finish it more along the lines of, after I interact with others, I feel ready for more, or I feel energized. So I want to do like a really quick show of hands. Where do you think you fall? In which group do you fall? Do you feel more introverted? Do you feel more extroverted? Or maybe you recognize both. So if you would indulge me and just briefly type in your answer in the chat box, just to get a feel of where everyone is that's joining today. So I see a bit of both, yes? Yes. Another person says both. Someone says definitely introverted. Someone says slightly more introverted. Yes. So as expected, I think most people here would either be introverted or both. And I really like that a lot of people recognize both sides, because this is also very interesting. Like no one is like 100% introverted or extroverted. We're usually a combination of both. I recognize that too. Some people think of it as a spectrum. So they say that means that the more introverted you are, the less extroverted you are, and vice versa. But some people think of it more like two sides of the same coin. So meaning that we can alternate between the two, depending on the situation or the people we're with, or the type of activity that we're doing. Some people really fall in the middle, and that's what we call ambivert. But for most people, one will be more dominant. So introverts share a bunch of traits in some combination or another. And I like to call this our introverted superpowers. So it's a little bit of a joke, but I really do like to say that, because a lot of the time, it's the things that make us a little weird, you know? And sometimes we experience them as limitations, but I actually see them, they can be very, very powerful traits, especially when you can channel them towards the things that are really important to you. And it can become very easy to achieve the things that you would like and to live the life that you would like to live. So I've listed a couple of them here, and I'm only going to highlight a few of them because, you know, we don't have a lot of time. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but I want to highlight a few of them to kind of explain to you why it is that we need to recharge when we interact with other people. So over here I have, you know, we're usually the quiet observers. People might have said that you're a good listener. And this one over here is also a very important one. We self-reflect a lot, and we need time to formulate our thoughts and opinions. So because we observe, we're very observant, we pick up a lot of detail in our daily experiences. And we process these stimuli very differently than an extroverted person does. And this can cause us to become overstimulated by things that don't really bother extroverts. For example, in social interactions, like maybe this conversation even, you're probably listening to my words, but you might be picking up a lot more than that. You're probably looking at my hand gestures, my facial expression, eye movements maybe. Some people will pick up details from the space that I'm in, clothes that I'm wearing. And so there's a lot of detail that we pick up, and we do most of this on a subconscious level. And arguably, we pick up a lot more detail than extroverts do. That's during the interaction. And then afterwards, we self-reflect. So maybe tomorrow or a week from now, you might think back to a conversation that you've had. You might run the conversation over in your head. Maybe you're thinking of previous conversations that you've had with that person, or something that you've read in the news related to the topic. So there's a lot of iteration there in the self-reflection process, and we actually need that to make these connections and to formulate our thoughts and opinions. Now, an extroverted person, of course, also makes these connections, but they usually need to verbalize their thoughts at each junction before they can move on. Whereas an introvert person does most of this in their head. So other things that you might recognize are these three here. So sometimes people say that we look a bit angry. Or they experience us as very critical because we ask a lot of questions, or they think that we're shy because we like to be quiet. Now, so yeah, things that you might have heard are maybe smiling doesn't hurt, or just join in, or why do you always sit in the back? And these things can be quite hurtful in the moment, especially when we're young and we hear them as children, because actually we are very, very interested when we listen so intently. Because we spend so much time in thought, our when we're deep in thought, our facial expression tends to become very serious, and that can be interpreted differently by the people around us. So a combination of these factors is why it can be quite stressful when we are asked to formulate our thoughts very quickly, like give your opinion right away, or when you're asked to speak up in a meeting with a lot of people, especially extroverted people who are like shooting off a lot of ideas. This can cause a lot of stress because we're not able to go through the natural process that we have of processing all those details and then formulating our thoughts through self-reflection. And I think that the challenge here for us as introverts is to first create more space and understanding for this natural process in our own minds. And then we can explain it to other people and create space and understanding there. But I really do think that the first step is to create this peace of mind for yourself. And this is why I think that creating mental space is so important. So what do I mean when I say mental space? Mental space is a way to remove this mental clog. Because we are so observant and there's so much detail and that we process, basically our mind gets clogged. And I feel it like a fog on my forehead that kind of is a signal of like, I'm full, no more. And creating mental space is a way to remove this so that we can readily make the mental connections through the self-reflective process that we do. And it becomes much easier to perform at your best, even in stressful situations. When you can do this effectively, you're much less overstimulated. There's less anxiety. And you can tame the inner critic much better because the inner critic also becomes more dominant when we're overstimulated. There's less physical fatigue that goes with that because make no mistake, all this processing, it takes a lot of energy. And then on the productivity side of things, it takes away some of the unpredictability in what we can produce each day. Because you can imagine if you're already overstimulated and you're then asking yourself to also deliver output, there is no more processing power for that. So you can also make your output much more consistent. Now, how do you create mental space? Okay, so in a practical sense, this just means creating more opportunity for rest and recharge. Because rest and recharge supports this natural self-reflective process. And we need to go through that to get to the next step. There's not really a shortcut there. And the stress and anxiety happens a lot when we're trying to shortcut it. We're trying to just go from, I've seen this and this is my opinion, but we need to go through this process here. And this could be every month, every week, every day, depending on the person. So I think you may already be doing this. Like a lot of people, we naturally gravitate towards certain activities that rest and recharge us, but maybe you haven't connected it with mental space yet, or maybe you're not doing it very deliberately yet. So one way that we all recognize and that we know is a way to create rest and to recharge is going on vacation. So most of us haven't had an opportunity for a vacation in over a year. And I think that the past year has kind of shown both sides of what mental space can mean for us. So some introverts have told me that they didn't have to commute to work, they didn't have to socialize as much, and they actually had more time to recharge. They feel great. But other introverts actually have experienced the opposite, like being in the house all the time with other people always there, maybe children, especially if you have young children, your spouse, pets, all the stimulation with no real opportunity to be alone and to kind of process all this stimuli leaves them overstimulated. So I believe that waiting for that vacation or even for the weekend is really flawed. And especially for introverts, we need to do this mental declogging on a much more regular basis. And how regular, that will depend on the person. But so I've come up with a simple exercise, and this is just to get you started because it's about creating more opportunities to rest, maybe even throughout the day. So sit down for about 15 minutes. You can do it right after this call and write down a couple of things that really relax and energize you. Go for 3 or more if you can, but have at least 1 or 2 that you can fall back on. And like I said, you may already be doing this. So look for things that you naturally gravitate towards when you feel overstimulated or a little bit full, mentally full. And things that people have said that work well for them are like reading and going for a walk, walking the dog, gardening, or even playing a video game for half an hour. For some people, that works really well. I like to make a coffee and sit by the window while I drink it. So it can be very simple things like that. And it can be anything that takes a few minutes to half an hour. And on the last day, day 3 of the taster, you'll understand why I'm asking you to go for a shorter time frame here. Okay. So I hope that was helpful. Let me know what you took away from today. And if you want to send me your exercises, you'll get the information. If someone has a burning question for me, please feel free to ask it or either type it in the chat box if you don't want to be in the recording, obviously. And if you have to dash off, please feel free to do so. Thank you for joining today, and then I will see you tomorrow. I'll stop sharing my screen. Actually, let me stop the recording as well.